Hey, moms, it's Michelle, your Chief Hope Builder. Today I have Edie Weinstein here, and I met Edie because she and I are both going to be speaking on the stage with TEDx in October, the very first day of October. And I met Edie and thought, oh my goodness, you moms need to hear her story. She has over 40 years experience as a counselor and a therapist with a bachelor's of arts in psychology and a master's in social work. She's had more than 25 years experience as a writer, interviewer, and editor. Her specialties include colorful and creative writing as a freelance journalist and author. She's a dynamic, inspiring speaker and workshop facilitator, an interfaith minister who offers unique spiritual services and rituals, including weddings, baby blessings, funerals, rites of passage, and house blessings. And I heard her TEDx talk, and I was just, I just absolutely loved it. And I wanted to share a little bit of her and her overcoming the taboo of touch. And that is the topic of her TEDx talk. So help me welcome Edie. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
I'm so excited.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your TEDx talk and how you got that idea.
Okay, absolutely. Well, first of all, I'm looking forward to sharing the stage with you and a number of people in our coaching group. And I've wanted to do a TED Talk for as long as I can remember. The first one I saw was with Elizabeth Gilbert, and she was talking about creativity and the creative muse. And I felt like she was speaking to me. And I said, I want to do with that, what she's doing. So I created something that I thought would be not just interesting to people, but could change lives. And that's the whole focus, ideas worth sharing. So when I worked with our coach, Caesar, he said, tell me about your idea. So rolling back the clock to the mid-1980s, and I was in graduate school at Rutgers University in Camden, New Jersey, working on my MSW, I call it Master of Saving the World, not just Master of Social Work. And that ties in very nicely with what we're going to talk about too.
Yes,
with your listeners. So when I was in grad school, I did a paper that earned me a scholarship, like a partial scholarship. And it was on counseling practitioners' views on using touch as a therapeutic modality, because the idea is we were not supposed to touch our clients. No handshakes, no hugs, no hands on the shoulder, nothing physical. And the reason we were told was because of transference and countertransference and people who are trauma survivors and abuse survivors and crossing boundaries, all kinds of things like that. So when I mentioned it to Caesar, he says, well, let's turn that on its head and let's talk about good reasons to touch your clients. And I said, with consent, because that's all, what this is all about. And I said, well, what would it be like if when you meet your client for the first time, they're willing to shake your hand? Or if they're crying, they ask you for a hug, you're not going to sit there stoically, you're going to hug them. When they're leaving the office, you put your hand on their shoulder. Again, all with verbal consent, all with their permission. So that's essentially what my TED Talk is about, is overcoming that taboo of touch, because we live in such a touch negative society. Touch is either limited, sexual, abusive, coercive, or non-existent. And chances are some of your listeners grew up in homes that fit that criteria. Blessedly, I didn't. I grew up in a home where touch was abundant. Lots of hugs and kisses and I love yous growing up. So I would tell my parents that they raised me to do this kind of work, this consent work, this touch work. And when people don't get enough nurturing touch, just like babies, when adults don't get enough nurturing touch, they fail to thrive too. And that results in depression, suicidality, addiction, loneliness, particularly now during the pandemic. As we're talking now, we're two years and 2 months into it. And so many more people are lonely and isolated and don't get enough nurturing touch. And, I tell several stories about how touch saves lives. I am the founder of Hug Mobsters Armed with Love. And this group was created in 2014, Valentine's Day weekend, 2014. I brought a group of friends to 30th Street Station, which is the big train station in Philadelphia. And I gathered us together for a free hugs flash mob. And
I love this story.
yeah, it was,
Just picture this free
yeah,
love
oh yeah, there
flash mob in
free
the
hugs
heart of
flash mob.
Philadelphia.
Yep. So we made up our free hug signs, and at noon we unleashed ourselves on the station. And one of our friends is a singer performer, and he was walking around playing the song "Give a Little Bit." Give a little bit of your love to me over and I don't know how many times he played it in an hour. And we would approach people and said, would you like a hug? And there were people that were waiting for trains, that were getting on trains, getting off trains. There was a couple getting married. They didn't want to hug. They just kind of waved us off. But a friend of ours videotaped the whole afternoon. And we estimated that within an hour's time, we hugged about 200 people. And there were 12 of us. And one person that just stole my heart was an Iraq War vet who approached us and said he was the only survivor of his platoon and he had survivor's guilt. And he had thought about ending his own life. He said, until I met you people, can I join you? So of course we gave him a sign and he was off to the races. Now, I don't know where he is. I don't know if he's still alive. I hope that he is. And I hope that he found a sense of peace. And that's when it occurred to me, hugs save lives. So fast forward to June of that year, and I'm on my way home from the gym after a normal workout. I was at the gym 5 or 6 hours a week, and I had a heart attack. Literally, as I was driving, I was in the middle of a heart attack. And for women, heart attack symptoms are very different than men's symptoms. Torrential sweats, jaw, like somebody went and grabbed my jaw and I couldn't move it. It was like paralyzed. Heartburn, palpitations, dizziness, lightheadedness. It wasn't the crushing left arm and chest pain that men get. So instead of driving myself straight to the hospital, I drove home and I called the counseling center that I was working at the time. I was working in an outpatient drug and alcohol rehab. And I said, I'm not feeling very well. Can you cancel my clients for today? And then I thought, oh, I'm sweaty. I need to get in the shower. I said, what are you doing, woman? You know how you have these inner conversations? What the heck are you doing? Get to the hospital. And recovering codependent workaholic that I was, or am now, that I was an active workaholic, codependent back then, I drove myself to the hospital.
Oh my God.
Call 911. Crazy. So the hospital is only like 10, 12 minutes away. So I stumble into the ER and I say, I think I'm having a heart attack. They whisk me up to the cardiac cath lab. And I had a stent, had a cardiac catheterization and a stent inserted. So after the surgery was over, the surgeon came to me with 2 pictures. One was what my LAD, the one where they call it the widowmaker heart attack.
Yeah.
100% blockage. So before the stent was inserted, it looked like a broken tree branch. And afterwards it was popped back up. And he said, don't let this happen again. And I said, well, how did it happen in the first place? He said, well, tell me your history. My mother had died of congestive heart failure in 2010. So this was almost 4 years after she died. I was working 12 to 14-hour days, maybe sleeping 5 or 6 hours a night. I thought I was eating healthfully, a mostly vegetarian diet, but a lot of it was high in sodium. So my blood pressure was through the roof. And he said, you need to slow down. You need to change your diet. You're going to be going to cardiac rehab for a few months. So friends came in to visit me, and they were both involved in the mental health system as well. And Janet says, I demand to speak with your social worker. This person needs to know what your lifestyle is and tell you have to take 2 weeks off of work. And Phil, her husband, leans over me, and he's from New York. He was from New York. He has since died. But he leans over and he says, you go back to work next week. I come over and break both your legs. And I believed him. So I knew they cared, about me. So my boss at the time said, we're not going to let you in the door. We will take care of everything. Go relax. So for 2 weeks, I was laying on the couch watching the ceiling fan spin. And I had talked to a friend who had had a heart attack a few months before I did. And I said, how did you do this? He says, well, Susan made me take time off work, his wife. And he said, I was talking to somebody who was telling me about their heart attack, and they went right back to work immediately. And He said something like, don't let your heart attack go to waste. Learn from it.
Oh,
And what I say about it is that the woman that I was died that day to give birth to the one who's talking to you now. And she
oh,
had to die because she was killing me. Now, I didn't lose consciousness. I didn't, it was not a near-death experience. So during cardiac rehab, I walked through my little town of Doylestown, Pennsylvania, and I thought, why don't I combine the hugging with the walking? So I made up a sign and I stood on a street corner, corner of State and Main in this little town, and offered free hugs. And now, all these years later, 8 years later, June 15th of 24 of this year will be 8 years. I'm kind of a staple in the town. Like, people recognize me
oh,
even without my sign. And I've
oh,
hugged all over the country. I've hugged in Canada. And then in 2018, I took the trip of a lifetime, the year I turned 60, to Ireland. So I hugged my way across Ireland.
wow.
So I realized in my own life how hugs were sustaining for me. And during the pandemic, I was off duty. I couldn't do it. I live alone, and the only, I hugged myself. That was pretty much it.
Yeah.
And my grandson was born, he was like an early pandemic baby. He was born January 21st of 2020. And I was one of his caregivers in the beginning. And once the pandemic hit, I didn't see him for 11 weeks. So I
Oh,
did not hug another human being for 11 weeks.
oh,
And the only sentient being that I hugged during that time was my cousin's dog. I
oh,
went to visit my cousin Jody, and we were sitting like 20 feet apart in her yard. And Maddie, who's this chocolate lab, was running back and forth between us. So you know how big dogs think they're
yeah,
lap dogs?
yeah.
And I didn't
So,
care that she was muddy. I don't care, just like, oh.
yeah, just, yeah, let me
Yeah.
hug you.
Yeah.
Right.
So now I'm doing it again. I'm back out there in the world doing it. You just feel safer now. And, I, with my grandson and now my new granddaughter, who was born May the 6th.
Oh,
And so I
congratulations.
get to cuddle them. Thank you. Yeah,
Yes.
they're my favorite cuddlers.
Yes. So how often I've seen addicted loved ones who aren't getting hugged because people are afraid of them, people don't understand them, and oftentimes they're moms. Those moms that are in our group, I get it. They cannot handle the trauma of even seeing their child because of the addiction and what it does to them. And I don't know, maybe you could speak into that because you've had a lot of experience working with recovering addicted loved ones too. So, any words of wisdom for moms out there?
I don't know how wise it is, but the first thing I would tell parents of someone with an addiction, or any loved one of someone with an addiction, is know that you're going along the journey with them, but you can't fix it. That's the hardest thing for a parent to see,
Mhm.
is that I can't kiss all the boo-boos and make them better. And I would encourage them, and you've probably talked about this on the show, to get themselves some support as well, whether it's Al-Anon or CODA, Codependence Anonymous. Have a group, just like it's encouraged that people with addictions have sober supports. It's important that families have that support as well. And to do some kind of like self-evaluation and ask yourself, how do you feel about this person? They are still your child, even though they're doing self-destructive things, even though you're up at night worrying about them, even though they may have stolen from you or they may have been aggressive with you. This is still your child. So what kind of self-compassion can you offer while you're offering it to them? And if you can remember the first time you held this child,
Mm.
whether they're your birth child or an adopted child, what was it like to hold that
Mm.
little being in your arms?
Oh,
And can you still see that person inside someone who might be shooting up, someone who might be living on the street, someone who might be living in a bottle? That, can you still see that innocent little being in there? And I'm not saying it's okay to to accept the behavior, and it's so hard sometimes to tease out the behavior from the person.
yeah.
So as much as they'll allow it, as much as you'll allow it, when you're with them,
Yeah.
See if they'll allow you to hug them. And if you can, if you can deal with that yourself.
Right.
And I imagine that the moms who listen to this are lonely because this is the child that they had, they wanted by their side, and now they might not even know where they are or
Right.
whether they're alive.
Yeah. They're grieving. They're grieving
Yep.
for the loss
Yep.
of dreams they had.
Yep.
They have for
Yeah.
that child and for the relationship that they always envisioned that
Right.
they would have. And I think it was in November, our month of gratitude. Last couple of years, every year I've done this. And that is kind of like what you said, is try to remember the person and all the gifts that they have and who they are and who they were before addiction hacked their brain, right? So and that has really been helpful for moms, because every day we had to come up with one thing that we loved about our addicted or recovering child, and it was just another way to remember them. It was hopeful. It was hopeful. So and you mentioned earlier about your wanting to please all the time, and I think oftentimes women especially just feel like you said you have your degree in saving the world, like we so want to help in the right ways. How did you get over being that codependent people pleaser?
I don't know if there's a getting over,
It.
but it is, it feels to me like a work in progress. One of my dearest friends, who's been in recovery for 51 years, she's been sober 51 years, calls herself a recovered codependent. She doesn't, I don't think she calls herself a recovered alcoholic, but she calls herself a recovered codependent. And I don't know how that would be for me. She's learned, she's taught me. She was actually the one that kicked my butt into recovery from codependence.
Okay.
I went to a 5.5-day program out of a rehab in our area called Livengren. It's near Philadelphia. And there they taught me about boundaries because I was not very good at them at all. And unlike a lot of codependents, I grew up in a very loving, nurturing, accepting family. I never felt like my parents, that I couldn't meet their expectations. I couldn't meet my expectations. And their love didn't feel conditional, but I wanted it so much that I didn't want to lose it. So I called myself Little Shirley Temple, tap dancing for approval. And I learned to practice savior behavior because who wouldn't love a caregiver, right? So my husband, who died in 1998, used to say to me that I was an emotional contortionist who would bend over backwards to please people. I don't know where he got that from, but it was brilliant.
Wow.
I was a deer caught in the headlights when it came to making decisions. And I'm a Libra, so it's all about, balance and, trying to figure out the right thing to do. And the third thing that he said was that I was a deer caught in the headlights when it came to making decisions. Oh, we said that. And the third thing he said was, I was always looking over my shoulder to see if the propriety police were watching. Like, am I being a good
Oh,
girl? Because a lot of recovering women codependents are, good girls. They don't want to make waves. They don't want to draw too much attention to themselves. They're walking on eggshells a lot. And I did that. I didn't want anybody to be mad at me. I didn't want any disapproval. So just about every career path I took was in a caregiving role, a social worker, therapist, minister. I was a lifeguard for a while, so
wow.
I realized people have to save themselves. And what is it they say in AA, that you didn't cause it, you can't control it, you can't cure it in somebody
Right.
else?
Yeah.
And I had to give that up. So that time in Livengren was helpful. I had a pivotal moment when I started going to Codependence Anonymous meetings after Livengren. I went for about 5 years, 6 years, something like that.
Wow.
And during that time period, my husband was very ill. He had hepatitis C. And I was his, probably caregiver, and he was in and out of the hospital multiple times. So in my meeting was a young man who was 21 years old, something like that. And I was almost 40 at the time. So I guess he looked at me as kind of like a big sister, maybe even a mother figure, kept asking me to be a sponsor. And I said, first of all, I can't be your sponsor. You need a man to be your sponsor. Second of all, even though I'm a therapist, I am so new to this recovery, I wouldn't do you any good. And third, my husband is very ill and I don't have the
Oh,
time to
right.
devote to being anybody's sponsor. And in all the years that I was there, I never sponsored anybody. And that was one gift I gave to myself. So the day that my husband died, he was in the ICU at Jefferson, which is a hospital in Philly, and we turned off life support. He was in a coma. The
Oh,
liver transplant never happened. And my parents were there, and they drove home with me here, and the phone rang. And back then I had a wall phone, I'm pointing to the kitchen over there.
oh
I
yeah.
had a landline,
Yeah.
and I answered the phone, and it was this kid, and he starts talking to me, and I said, please call somebody from the phone list. I said, not only can I not be your sponsor, I can't even talk to you right now. My husband just died, but, and I said, I'm hanging up. And I felt such a sense of elation. Like I said no to somebody, and
Yeah.
lightning didn't come crashing down, and the floor didn't swallow me up. So that was the beginning of the end of the codependent.
Wow.
Didn't stop then. I still had to raise a child as a single parent. 11, my son was 11 at the time, and he's 35
Oh,
now. So I had a hard time with that, saying no, setting boundaries.
yes.
And, I took on projects that I didn't have the time for. I said yes to anybody who wanted to pick my brain about ideas. And, when I think about and you probably have this happen too, when you think about all of the time and energy and knowledge that you've given away, you'd be a gazillionaire.
Yeah.
If you got paid for all the wisdom you dispense,
Yeah.
So I've learned to say yes only to what I can handle. And I've had to turn down jobs. I've had to turn down assignments
Sure.
because I don't have the time for everything.
And you would probably say that it was that day after your heart attack that you decided that person was gonna die, and it was a
Yep.
rebirth of somebody new.
Yep.
And from that day forward, then you started being able to delineate your boundaries better.
Yep.
And say no. So I just can't get over how many people, including myself at times, struggle with boundaries. Do you feel like this is a universal problem?
Yep.
And
Yeah. And I don't want to pigeonhole by gender, but I think women are trained to say yes. We don't want to upset the apple cart. We don't want anybody to be mad at us. Boundaries in relationships. There's so many women who say yes to things they don't want to say yes to, including sex, because they don't want the person to be mad at them, or because they think they're supposed to say yes.
yeah.
And any kind of touch, like the hashtag me. There aren't too many women that we know that haven't had their boundaries crossed in minor or major ways. About touch. Now, I'm sure that men have a difficult time with boundaries themselves, with a lot, what I told my son, I forget how old he was, so 11, 12, right after my husband died. We talked about the idea that not only does no mean no, but only yes means yes. And anybody is free to change their mind, including you. That if somebody wants, sexual interaction with you that you don't want, you say no.
Right.
And from what I know, he's been a gentleman in every relationship he's been in, and
Wow.
hoping, I'm hoping, I raised him well. And now,
for teaching him that so early. I don't think I ever, now I do with my grandkids. I had to, I was guardian for several years when their parents were in active addiction. And so that was one of the things that I made sure, we talked about quite a bit, because the youngest is definitely a people pleaser. And the idea of saying no just really, most of the times, didn't even cross her consideration in a lot of things that she does with her peers. And it's scary. So good for you for being intuitive enough to talk. And so many kids learn boundaries from their parents. And so, but did you have, it sounds like you had a similar childhood that I did. My parents were really good at setting boundaries. I mean, we knew what we could do and what we couldn't do. And there was, did you have the same?
Yeah, they did. There were rules, and I followed the rules because I respected my parents. I was not afraid of them. There was no physical. I don't even like calling it discipline. Nobody got hit. Okay, we don't.
Yeah,
That's
right.
one of my. I'm an outspoken advocate about that. That hands off. When you're angry with somebody, you don't touch them, and even spanking, hitting another human being teaches them that a bigger, stronger person can control a smaller, weaker person with aggression. And I hear people say, well, I got hit and I was okay. And I ask them this question. I say, if what was done to you was done by that person to another adult, like an adult stranger, could that person press assault charges? And if they say yes, I say, then that's abuse. And I said, let me ask you a second question. If what was done to you, if whoever hit you hit a neighbor's child, could that parent press assault charges? And if the answer is yes, that's abuse. So there are certainly ways of helping people understand boundaries without physical aggression. And and if you want your child, if you want to model for them how to control themselves, emotional regulation, you better learn it yourself.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. So that's a big one. So yes, I did have those boundaries. I wasn't afraid of my parents. I respected them.
Yeah.
So what was the other thing that you were just asking about?
Oh,
The
probably.
middle-aged moment.
Oh,
Right up my brain. You were
yes.
talking about
Yeah.
boundaries.
Well,
I know.
go
One
ahead.
thing that I was going to say, it was about touch with children, that when I do the free hugs thing and there's a child there, I'll say to the parent, if it's okay with you and okay with your child, can I hug your child? Because if mom and dad say, oh yeah, go hug that lady, but the little kid's hiding behind mom or dad, I'll say, it's okay. And I said, this is a teachable moment. And I said, you don't need to hug anybody that you don't want to hug.
Right.
Even my grandson, he's very cuddly with me on his own terms. So when I'm leaving the house, if one of them says, well, go hug Bubby, Bubby's Yiddish for grandmother. And I'll say, do you want to hug Bubby? And sometimes he will, sometimes he won't. And I'll say, well, how about blow kisses? And he blows kisses. So
Yeah.
adults need to understand body sovereignty, that I think
Yes.
that's one way to help prevent child sexual abuse, is if they understand nobody touches my body unless, I say so.
Right. I love that. So thanks for bringing that up. That's what
Sure.
I was thinking. It was like you were reading my mind. I first listened to you on a podcast. Do you remember what that was? It was about consent and
Yeah.
obtaining consent, this whole topic to hug. Do you remember what that was?
I don't know. I mean, I do a lot of podcasts. I think I
Yeah.
know which one you're talking about, but I can't even remember who
Okay.
it was.
Well, I'll try to remember it and put it in the show notes.
But yeah, but I mean, I remember the content, but I don't remember who it was with. So yeah,
good.
consent is important. I mean, we're taught that, like pregnant women, for example, their bellies are public property. Like people will pat a pregnant woman's belly without touching. I mean,
Yeah.
even my daughter-in-law, when she was pregnant with my grandson, I said, is it okay? And she said, sure. So with her permission, I kissed her belly,
Yeah.
and, I think it's really important for people to understand that. Other thing, women of color, their hair, that, somebody will say, oh, what beautiful braids you have. So they'll hands off. If it doesn't belong to you, it's the same rules that I remember my mother teaching us whenever we'd go into stores where there were breakable items, our hands would have to go behind our back.
Yeah.
She wasn't afraid we were going to steal something. She's afraid we were going to break something. Right. So the rule in our family was, if it's not yours, don't touch it. And if you want to touch something, ask first.
Yeah, good. I get this question a lot, and this might be a tough one for you to speak on in a few minutes, but oftentimes, so when my son and daughter-in-law were in active addiction, they still wanted to see their kids. And oftentimes moms are so torn because they want the relationship to continue. But I always say, you're the advocate, you're the guardian for the kids. Do you feel like they are going to be safe with their parents, right? And I don't know. I always had a mediator present during those times, because I didn't want them telling some judge that I was keeping them from their kids, but I also knew that they weren't safe in their parents' home alone without somebody there, because I didn't know who was coming and going. I didn't know
Of
anything,
course.
right? So can you speak into like what would you say to moms who want to initiate this relationship, or continue the relationship with a parent that is in active addiction from their own children? Like where are those boundaries, and can you speak into that just a little?
Well, it depends on what the legal agreements are. Like if you have custody of your child, or in your case, your grandchildren, and the parents have visitation rights, usually, isn't it set up with, a supervised visit?
Well, in our case, we obtained legal guardianship with their signature. We went with a private attorney. So we were kind of, what happens, at least in our state, because we thought, well, the state would get involved then and we would have some rules or laws to follow, right? No, it was just helter skelter. And so I started just trying to find people that could help answer my questions, and nobody could. So I had to establish my own boundaries with the situation. And we kind of just went with our gut. And yeah.
So did they want to see their parents, your grandchildren?
No,
They didn't.
no.
Okay.
A lot of
Yeah.
times they didn't, and that's where, but see, even the youngest one didn't want to go back to her parents after they were 3 years in recovery. So you have to look at that and say, would the state disagree with that? I mean, how are we to play judge? As guardians, it's tough.
It is a tough call, because I mean, I don't think kids have standing in court to make that decision until they're 12, 13, 14.
Yeah.
There are situations. Yeah. So even if addiction's not an issue, there are family situations where where the grandparent has guardianship, or of the child, and the child is not yet a teenager but doesn't want to see the biological parents. There are other reasons why that happens, why the grandmother has custody, but I think children should be able to say yes or no.
Yeah.
That's my take on it. As compassionate as I might feel toward the person in recovery, that child's welfare comes first.
Yeah.
And if the grandparent or another family member's home is more stable, more supportive, doesn't mean they should never see their parents, but I think it needs to be at the child's discretion.
Yeah.
That when, and again, I'm not in any way disrespecting people who are in active addiction, because it's not, they might have made the choice to use the first time, but after that, the substance takes hold, and their ability to make decisions is not there. It's not, not able to make healthy decisions.
Yeah.
So it is a very difficult choice to make. And there's, that whole, what's it called? Not estrangement, parental alienation syndrome. Have you ever heard of that?
No,
term?
I haven't. What's that?
Yeah, it's a term that has to do with just what, an example, if there's a custody hearing between the parents themselves, and one parent says that the other parent is trashing them to the child, so of course they're not going to like the child, or not, that child's not going to like the parent, rather, that they're making up stories about them.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the experience of your listeners are in terms of not trash talking the parent, and that's hard. It's really hard to do.
Yeah.
And if you feel that the child is in danger, and I'm not even talking about physical danger, I'm talking about emotional danger.
Right. Oh.
That if they go back to visit the parent in the home where the addiction was active, it could do emotional damage to the child. It could be traumatic going back there.
Yeah.
Wow. So it's a tough call, and I don't know what the legalities are.
No. Yeah. and that's, it's a boundary, but I think you've raised some really good points. And it's like the consent with the hug. You really have to delve into what is the child comfortable with, and where is their
Right.
trauma, where does their trauma lie, and where is that? And it's not always black and white. It's
Right.
very difficult. So, but I'm just trying. So, what was the hardest part of writing your TEDx talk?
The hardest part was narrowing it down, because
To
I had
your
so many things I wanted to put in there, and Caesar was brilliant at helping me do surgery, like, hey, you got to take this part out and this is stronger, and you got to focus on the through line. And for folks who don't know what I'm talking about, the through line is the theme that runs through it. And so I think that was the hardest part. And where I am right now with it is, we're October 1st. We're starting the coaching in, let's say, the 15th. So 6 days from now, I think on the 21st is when the coaching part for that particular TED Talk is supposed to start. And my biggest fear is my memory. Am I going to be able to remember this? So I'm a spontaneous speaker. I can talk about anything. You throw a question at me and pretty much able to come up with it. But having to memorize, a 14-minute or 15-minute talk and get it all down, that's the scary part. And
I'm right there with you.
yeah. So what I've been doing is I've been practicing it myself. I've been sharing it with other people to get a sense of what it sounds like. And I've been watching a lot of other people's TED Talks.
Yes, good idea. And I try to share. So I went out and just started researching all the addiction TED Talks, so that I could start sharing them in my support groups, in my Facebook groups, because the more moms watch those, I think they're just so good. I've found some really, really, really good ones. So, but yeah, that's a great advice for anybody, even if you're not looking to give a TEDx talk. So, and the through line, I kind of looked at that like it was a thesis statement in writing an essay or something. It's your thesis paragraph. What are you going to prove for the duration of your talk? And in my case, it was to start doing one thing and stop doing something else. And I guess that's just how Caesar and I kind of formed that big spot. What are we going to stop doing and what are we going to start doing? So it helped. But the memorization, oh boy. Yeah. And I'm older than you, so it's going to be harder.
Well, I think the practice is going to help. About 4 years ago, I think I did a talk for the Good Men Project. That's one of the places that I write. And they had a storytelling hour in New York. And I was asked to pick out a story. And the theme was travel. So I told a story called Meet You at the Gate. And I'll send you a copy of it if you want to hear it. And it was about my journey with my parents. They retired at 65, moved down to Florida. So I started out telling the story about how the very first time I went down there to visit them, they met me at the gate. And that was when people were allowed through TSA and all that. So they meet me at the gate. And as they got older, the distance between when I got off the plane and where I could meet them widened, as they aged. And so it was meet me at the gate, then it was meet me at baggage claim, then it was meet me at the car. And then my dad developed Parkinson's, so he couldn't even get out of the car at that time. And then when he got too sick, my mother, I had to take a cab or a van to their place because she couldn't leave him alone. And then I talked about how after he died, she'd be sitting out on the porch waiting for me. And then we talked about our hospice journey because she'd been in hospice for 6 months before she died, and I would travel back and forth from Pennsylvania to Florida. And then I finally talked about how the last time I was down there was to sell the condo and close it all up. So I was terrified. The only time I'd ever had stage fright was in anticipation of this. And we rehearsed it. It had to be memorized, same thing, 10 minutes. And I kept saying, well, this story by heart. You've told it a million times. What's the big deal? Well, but it's New York City. That was it. It was just the location.
It was the
So,
location.
yeah, it was because it was New York. New York, it was a big deal. So I talked to friends who lived in New York at the time, and she's a singer-songwriter, stage performer. She said, we will be there. We will be sitting in the front row. It was in a little restaurant bar kind of place. So there were maybe 60 people there. It wasn't even a big audience. And they were there for sound check. And I said, I can't see anything. She said, you're not going to be able to see anything because of the lights in your eyes, but know that we're here and you were listening. So I did the talk, and afterward, like months afterward, I get an email from the person who had organized it. And she said, you were the best one there. We saved you for last because you were the best speaker. And I never knew that. Never knew it. So if I could do that, I can do this. But I see people, on their little red circles. And I actually got, I don't know whether I told you that, but I got a little red rug.
Yeah.
Yeah. So because somebody else on our Facebook page got, told us about it. So you can order it from Amazon. So it's over there in my dining room.
What's the dimension? What's the radius?
Oh God. I'm looking at it here. I think maybe 3 feet around, 4 feet around.
Okay.
Yeah. If I could find the link, I'll send it to you.
Oh, thank you.
But it's a fuzzy bathroom rug, actually.
Oh my goodness.
So I stand on it, I walk across it barefoot. I don't wear shoes walking on it. So it's kind of an anchor for manifesting what I want. And I applied to like a dozen different stages. So since then, I was tapped for another stage, but it was a week earlier than this one. And it was closer to home. It was like half the distance of the one that we're doing in Ohio. And I decided that I wasn't even going to, I made it through the first round. And I wasn't even going to go any further because, I made a commitment. So I said, it was kind of like, agreeing to go on a date with somebody and then changing your mind because you got a better offer.
Yeah.
I said, no, I'm not going to do that. So I wrote a letter and I said, I appreciate it. And there's no way, because I had talked to Caesar about the possibility of adapting it, doing a different talk. He said, no, you're not going to have time. You're not going to, but he said, it would be kind of interesting to see what would happen if you made it through the audition. I said, but I felt like I'd be doing it under false pretenses. So
I couldn't do it either. Good for you.
Yeah. So it, felt good. And we'll see. But how, so I told him I'd apply next year.
Oh, I bet they'll be waiting for you. Really. Good for you.
Maybe.
That says something about your integrity and who you are.
Thank you.
Yes. And how big of an audience do you think it'll be at the TEDx in Lima? Any idea?
No clue. I don't know, anything about, we can ask, ask Amy. But I remember something that a friend said, who's a internationally known speaker. He said, the message is the message, whether there's one person in the audience or 1,000 people in the audience. Yeah. And we're not going to be able to see them anyway.
Right. Okay.
The lights will be
I'm so glad you said that. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
Edie, this was so good.
Oh, my pleasure.
Thank you for sharing a part of you. There's so much more we could talk about. If we did this again, what would you want to talk about?
Oh, goodness. One thing that I love talking about is, manifesting the life of your dreams, creativity, the Hansel and Gretel breadcrumb trail that brings you from where you were to where you are. I can talk about a gazillion different things.
Okay.
I get to loss and grief because that's one of my specialties too.
Oh, grief.
Talking about loss and grief. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Both of those are so good. I'm launching my next book, Unhackable Moms.
I like that.
It is a 30-day program, but it's to get moms to think about their boon, like their greatest desire, something that they've always wanted to do, but they put aside because of this addiction in their life. And so I love the creativity and the dream idea to talk to you about that. And then, but also so many, even if their kids are still living and in recovery, they're still grieving. And we have trauma. And so the whole grief thing, I'd love to have you back and talk about a little bit about that.
Sure.
So maybe we will do that. I don't know, within a few months, let's have you back and do that.
Anytime. I love it. This is one of my favorite, and I'm grateful for the technology that allows us to do this.
aren't you? So,
yeah. Oh,
so wait,
yep. I was.
so can we hug goodbye? Like, how
Oh,
is
yes,
that? Like
absolutely.
this? Like you go like this? Oh, so the last support meeting I had, I told them all about you and I said, okay,
Oh,
when was the last time you all had a hug? And how many did you have today? And when did you hug yourself last? So we all
yeah,
stood there or sat
good.
in our Zoom meeting and hugged ourselves. So thank you so
Marvelous.
much for
Oh, my pleasure.
your
That's,
inspiration and
that's what that's what I'm here for. Yeah, but the TED
contribution.
Talk, there's going to be some hugging going on too. So you'll get
Oh,
to
good.
see that.
I can't wait.